So, hello everybody. My name is Musa Wesutsa. I'm a trainer with Sentinel Africa. And today we're going to talk about the Privacy Information Management System and the Information Security Management System, more about the similarities and the differences as you go into implementing the two. So, going right into it, when you're looking at the ISMS, that's the Information Security Management System, you can find the requirements in the ISO 27001 standard, that's a 2013 version. On the other hand, if you're looking at the Privacy Information Management System, the requirements are in ISO 27701 standard, the 2019 version. If you're looking at the ISMS also, you're concerned mainly with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your information and critical information assets, while with the PIMS, you're more concerned with your customer data or your staff data, data that is personally identifiable information. So that's more private data and protecting that privacy. Now, with the ISMS, when it comes to the implementation, we can always break it down into the four phases known as the plan, do, check, act phases. So in the plan phase, you're looking at the establishment of the ISMS. And here you're mostly concerning yourself with what is the organization, what does the organization do, what are its internal and external issues, who are the stakeholders, and how do they contribute towards the organization. So here you're looking at carrying out a gap assessment and then writing up information security policy so that at the beginning you have a way, you have a roadmap. Then the next, under the do phase, we now conduct the risk assessment and do the risk statement, identify the controls, and actually go into implementation of the controls. In the check phase, you're reviewing the effectiveness of your ISMS by identifying the KPIs as your key performance indicators, and then trying to find out how well you're doing. So by churning out a performance report, doing an internal audit, and of course, doing your management reviews. The last phase, which is the act phase, is about improvement. So you want to make sure that your ISMS is continually improving its ability to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your critical information assets. Okay. Now let's continue. So if you look at the PIMS on the other hand, we can still implement it using the plan, do, check, act model. Now, the only difference is this. With the PIMS, we must already have an ISMS in place. So in the planning phase, as we're establishing the PIMS, we're asking ourselves, what is the ISMS in place? What is its width and breadth? What is the scope of the ISMS? Now we're asking ourselves, what is the maturity of the organization as concerns privacy? Now, the other thing which we're asking ourselves at this stage, which is very important, is the role of the organization. So the organization can be one of two things. It can either be a data controller or it can be a data processor or both. Okay, so at this stage is when you're deciding what role the organization is actually playing. So we also need to define the scope of the PIMS. We need to define what are the regulatory requirements that we are facing, and then we also need to look at our statement of applicability and make sure that it actually applies to the organization. The next phase, which is the do phase, we are carrying out a privacy impact assessment and the risk assessment. We're making sure that we have done this too and gotten our report. We're also making sure that we have a privacy policy which is in place. Now, the privacy policy will is a document where we ensure we've told our PII process principles, or our data subject everything that we do with the information that we collect. So it's a very important document that you need to have. And remember, you need to share it with the public. Make sure that they know why we're collecting the information, what are we doing with the information, how long we keep it, and many other requirements. Now, as the PIMS is in place, it is to be reviewed. Okay, so we have to ensure, again, we have some key performance indicators which we are reviewing just the same way we do it with the ISMS. So actually, already with an ISMS, you don't need to recreate another process for doing the same thing with the PIMS. Improvement, again, will follow the same process that you do with your ISMS. There's no need to create another method, but definitely we need to know that your PIMS also is continuously improving its ability to protect the critical information. Okay, so let's continue into the application. So as I said, the ISMS will just concern itself with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all your information assets. The ISMS is a baseline, it's a basis. So you cannot have privacy without having security. Okay. So the PIMS, on the other hand, concerns itself with protection of the PII of your data subject, or what the ISO standard calls the PII principle. Okay, so that is a natural individual whose information you have collected for purposes of processing. So that is very key for you to understand. That is that's a very significant difference between an ISMS and a PIMS. So as I said, security, you cannot have privacy without having security first. So security is very important for you to achieve your privacy. So let's talk a bit about the standards. Okay, so talked about the ISMS and the PIMS being implemented by following the requirements of ISO standards. So we have some ISO standards here, and this is a hierarchy of the standards. So the top you have the vocabulary. The vocabulary basically gives you the term and definitions of all the information security related terms. So they will all be found there. Then, when it comes to requirements, you have a list of standards that you give you mandatory requirements that you must follow for you to be able to show that you are meeting the intended outcome or the intended objectives of this particular discipline. The other thing about requirements documents is that you can actually get certified against these standards. So that tells you that you can actually get ISO 27001 certification, and you can also get ISO 27701 certification. So they're actually two different certificates. Now, below there, you have general guides and then you have industry guides. So, depending on the industry, you can actually get recommendations that are very specific to your industry, or you can have general guides that are recommendations that gives you ideas about how to implement some requirements that have been stated up there in the requirements documents. Okay. So continuing into the benefits. So why do we do this? Why would we implement an ISMS? Why would we implement a PIMS? So the first thing there is regulatory compliance. You'll see many organizations are seeking compliance to some regulations. So, for example, financial services will be seeking compliance to who in in that jurisdiction. For example, there will be a regulatory organization. There will be a central bank who's a regulator of financial services. So they'll have some requirements. So there are some countries that require ISO standards as part of the regulatory compliance. The other thing about regulatory compliance that is very relevant, especially to the PIMS, is that it allows you to demonstrate that you're complying to some laws. It allows you to demonstrate that you're complying to the GDPR, for example, allows you to demonstrate that you're complying to some local laws around data protection and privacy. The other thing is it allows you to show that you are different, yeah, from your competition. Gives you a competitive advantage because it's a differentiator. So that's a very good advantage for you when you can show that you have an ISMS in place, when you can show you have a PIMS in place. Then gives you the ability to demonstrate to your customers that you are really taking information security seriously, you're taking privacy seriously, so they will have more confidence in you, they'll have more confidence in your ability to protect their data. Then it also allows you to have improved security within your organization, and of course implement risk management frameworks which elevate your ability to make decisions based on risk. So that's a very good thing that you need to think about as you are implementing your ISMS or your PIMS. Okay. Now, when it comes to control implementations, so we have a PIMS and an ISMS controls. So they are structured in such a way that every control is implemented to achieve a certain objective. So we have control objectives, yeah, that then as they are implemented, will have met some intended outcome. So how we achieve this is, first of all, we'll do a risk assessment. So the risk assessment will give us our position in terms of our ability to actually achieve our intended outcome. Then we'll need to determine the applicability of the controls that we have in place, applicability of the control objectives, which we shall identify in the third stage. Then the fourth stage is, once those have been identified, then they'll need to be documented in something called a statement of applicability, which will basically indicate all the applicable controls in our organization that we intend to implement. Now let's go to the control objectives in the PIMS. So as I said, in the PIMS, the first thing that is important for us to do is to determine our role. Is the organization a PII controller, or is it a PII processor, or is it both? Now, here in the PIMS, we have four control objectives which we need to make sure that we are meeting. So the first control objective is conditions for collection and processing. And this objective talks about you determining and documenting that your processing is lawful. You need to have legal basis for collection of data and for processing of data. Okay, so that is the first control objective. The second control objective is around the obligations to the PII principles. So the GDPR will call this the data subject. Yeah, so the rights of the data subject. So you need to understand what are your obligations to the PII principles and make sure that you are actually meeting them. The third control objective is around privacy by design and privacy by default. And this basically talks about how we need to implement our systems to ensure that privacy is not something that we check up later, but it is actually embedded into the design of the application of the software or the process, okay, all the way to the end. Then PII sharing, transfer, and disclosure is the last control objectives, and we must be able to put in controls around how we share PII, how PII is transferred cross-border or within, okay, and disclosure. So these are the controls that are very necessary to meet this control objective. You'll find this in either the Annex A of 27001, which is applicable to the PII controller, or in Annex B of 27701, which is applicable to the PII processor. Now, on the other hand, in the ISMS implementation, we also have our controls and our control objectives. Okay, they are within the Annex A of ISO 27001. Now, this is how they are divided. Sorry. So we have 14 security domains, okay? And the first security domain being security policies. And then the second out, if you can see this diagram, the outer wheel has the 14 security domains. So security policies, organization of information security, asset management, going around all the way cryptography, all the way up to compliance, which is the last, which is the 14th security domain. Now, within all these domains, we have 35 control objectives, and then we have 114 controls, which when implemented, they will meet the requirements of those 35 control objectives. So this is what you do when you're implementing the controls within an ISMS, okay? So after this, you basically have seen the differences between a PIMS and an ISMS. So there's more for you. It will be good now to sign up to a course for you to learn more about the two. There's courses available around lead implementer course. We have a lead auditor course for ISO 27701 and ISO 27001. Join us, learn from us, make sure that you sign up for these courses. Write to us on training@sentinelafrica.co.ke, and this is how we get better. Thank you very much.